1901, and the visit to New Zealand of the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and York is recorded on film. This footage is the oldest surviving fragment of film shot in New Zealand, but over the years, Kiwis took to the art of the cinema with passion and ingenuity, and filmmakers recorded moments of our history and national life which now stand as permanent records of days gone by. Almost 90 years later, scores of these film fragments of our past were gathered from the vaults of the New Zealand Film Archive and the libraries of Television New Zealand to make a series of minute-long TVNZ programs which New Zealanders took to their hearts. The program is ANZ Magic Minutes, and here are 60 of the best. In 1935, and New Zealanders hear themselves in a big screen feature for the first time. It's the first Kiwi talkie down on the farm. Hollywood talkies were an international sensation, but the technology behind them was a closely guarded secret.
Oi, Cookie! Well, what do you want now? Hurry up, I'm busy.
To capture these scenes, soundman Jack had to invent his own talkie system.
All right, I'll have one later.
And it worked.
Goodbye, Cookie.
Appalling it may be by today's standards, but in 1935 it was do-it-yourself movie magic. There's always been a quid in looking after the housewife. It's hard to imagine it now, but there was a time when supermarkets were new.
The customer takes a trolley or basket and just helps herself to what she wants. Supermarkets are a popular feature of American life, and if the New Zealand public likes the idea, stores modelled on them may soon become established in this country.
We didn't invent the supermarket, but we have had our domestic pioneers.
This travelling washing machine service is run by Mrs. Watson, who calls at your home, unloads a washing machine and gets to work. Able to do several washes in one day, this service seems to be the answer to the busy housewife's problems. Mrs. Watson is not one to tarry, and no sooner is the wash done than she's away and another wash will be done before lunchtime.
And for the men, there was always rugby. 1905, and the legendary New Zealand rugby team of that time walks out against a Welsh club side in what is the first ever European tour by the first team ever called the All Blacks. They toured North America, France and Britain, and were undefeated until they got to the test in Wales, which they lost 3-0. The British press dubbed them the All Blacks because that was the colour they played in. But Dave Gallagher's 1905 All Blacks started a legend and began a feud with the men of Wales, which endures to this day. But we also had our pop stars. Some survive to this day. Ray Columbus. When the swinging 60s hit New Zealand, the beat music, the suits and the convulsive gyrations were all borrowed from Britain. But the young man under the mop top was Kiwi Columbus, and the girl he was singing about became an Australasian singer. With the Invaders, Ray had smash hits and wild concerts, and one night in Perth, they had to play She's a Mod 9 times.
She's a mod, she's a mod, yeah, yeah, she's a mod, she's a mod. She won't drink anymore.
If she's still a mod, she's in her 40s now, but for a whole generation, she's the sound of the 60s. And Dinah Lee, she was a mod. Dinah Lee, she put a Kiwi face on the swinging 60s.
Baby, oh my baby, oh baby, oh my baby, get with the beat, do the boogie woogie in the middle of it. Hello baby,
Her hair said London, her clothes said somewhere else, but she had a string of hits both here and across the Tasman with songs like Don't You Know Yokomo and Reet Petite. And everyone, except Dinah's baby, was doing the blue beat.
my baby, he just can't do the blue beat. Yeah, my baby, he just can't do the blue beat.
No mountain was too high for Hillary. Edmund Percival Hillary. When he climbed to the top of Everest on May 29, 1953, his life changed forever. He and Sherpa Tenzing had climbed where no man had climbed before, and it made Hillary perhaps the most famous New Zealander of all, and probably the most unassuming.
And I said, well, George, we knocked the bastard off.
He had left New Zealand a shy beekeeper and returned Sir Edmund Hillary, hero.
Edmund Hillary and George Lowe emerged to report all's well to the men and women who in spirit were never far behind them.
It was a present for the Queen on the eve of her coronation. It was a British expedition, but we knew it was a Kiwi who'd stood on top of the world. Then our eyes turned from Everest to Westminster.
On this day, not only in all parts of the British Commonwealth and Empire, but also among many friends elsewhere, minds and hearts are turning to Westminster Abbey.
Wellington,
where that
June
wonderful
1953.
ceremony,
While Britons
coronation
held
of our
street
Queen
parties or crowded around their
is taking
TVs and wirelesses, Britain's most distant colony celebrated Coronation Day with as much pomp and ceremony as it could muster. But for New Zealand, there was double cause for celebration.
Attended by representatives of the city and the nation, Sir Willoughby Norrie takes the salute in honour of the Queen. Honour which seems very personal when the news of Sir Edmund Hillary's achievement comes through.
It was the beginning of the Anzac story. In October 1914, and 8,500 Kiwi soldiers prepare to sail into World War I. Within 6 months, they will be immortalised as the Anzacs in a tragic encounter with the Turks at Gallipoli. More than 2,700 Kiwis will die in the campaign. But on this spring day, war was still an adventure to young men leaving home for the first time. They imagined they were headed to France to fight the Germans. Instead, they were shipped to Egypt to train alongside the Australians in preparation for the bloody assault that is commemorated as Anzac Day. While our men helped fight the Second Great War, we opened our doors. November 1, 1944. 700 Polish children arrived from war-torn Europe to a new life in New Zealand. They'd been invited here by Prime Minister Peter Fraser.
Many are orphans, many are motherless. Few know if their fathers are still alive. The little girls and the shaven-headed boys touch the hearts of the New Zealand people. The train takes them on the last leg of a long journey to Pahiatua camp, where they're to stay for a time. Why did these children come here? What is their story? They were the innocent victims of aggression.
In the 30s, the state became more caring. The kids got milk. 1937, and coming out of the Depression, New Zealand is the first country in the world to introduce free school milk.
And milk is now available to 160,000 children, and the scheme being extended as rapidly as possible.
The scheme is brought in by the first Labour government to prevent undernourishment in primary school children. And those were the days when if you were really good, you got to be a milk monitor.
Here's a delightful and typical scene. Never has any previous government looked after the children so well, and never were parents less anxious for their future.
School kids had 30 years of slurping milk through straws before the scheme was abandoned in better nourished times during the 60s. Whatever the sport, we wanted to be the best. Mark Todd and charisma. They'd won equestrian gold at the Los Angeles Olympics, but could they win again at Seoul? They easily won the dressage and the cross country. But show jumping isn't their best event, and charisma is now 16 years old.
They said, aren't you a bit worried about his age? Nobody told Charisma he's old. And he's clear over that. He can do what he likes with these last two. It really doesn't matter. It's Todd for two and two for Todd.
Oh, that's great.
Mark Todd and Charisma, the first time since 1932 that one horse and rider have won the Olympic gold medal for the three-day event in two successive Olympic Games, and it was a Kiwi who does it.
New Zealand and ANZ, 150 years young. We were also ready to accept change. The 10th of July 1967, the day we swapped pounds, shillings and pence for dollars and cents.
the 10th of July next year.
Halfpennies, pennies, threepences, sixpences, shillings, florins, half-crowns and pounds were gone forever. And the chief architect of the changeover was a young Under-Secretary for Finance called Rob Muldoon.
We've been doing our best to make the public feel that it's not going to be too bad, but I'm sure there'll be public apprehension up until the time of the changeover. And after that, people will be saying, well, what were we worrying about?
And he was right. Kiwis quickly took a shine to their new coinage.
Well, I think the changeover should have occurred years ago.
But some things didn't change.
And look at the great big
The Saturday night dance, a magic moment at the end of the week for Kiwis growing up in the 50s and 60s.
I had a chatiche with a tart from the butcher's, had a waltz with the constable's wife, had the beer from the keg on the cream truck, and the cop had one too, you can bet your life. Oh, it's great being out with the jokers, when the jokers are sparking and bright. Yeah, it's great giving cheek to the Sheilas down the hall on Saturday night.
They were irresistible and eligible, the American GIs. Young Kiwi women were keen on them. Young Kiwi men weren't so sure. But when 100,000 American soldiers came to New Zealand during World War II, they brought excitement with their jazz music and their inscrutable brand of football.
In fitting for the traditional army mule, a donkey introduces football American fashion to Auckland. The kickoff. This is about the only time you ever see the ball in this game. The big crowd tries hard to follow the play, but only millions of Americans can understand it. Well, fashions come and fashions go, but we still like the game they play on Eden Park or Carisbrook every Saturday afternoon.
Early this century, our pioneering spirit got us through. The Buller Gorge, 1910. For the first 2 decades of this century, the main form of road transport was stagecoach. In 1909, for instance, there were only 4 motor cars on the west coast. One traveller wrote that the road through the Buller was a nightmare. It was narrow, winding and sheer, with zigzag roads cut into rock. But if the traveller had the nerve or stomach to take in the view, the scenery was breathtakingly beautiful. Some of our biggest feats were on the rugby field. It was the day Kirky scored his greatest try. It's been called one of the greatest solo tries ever made by an All Black. It was against the Lions, Lancaster Park, 1971.
The corner flag was sort of not that far away, 50 metres away, which might sound a long way, but it's not that far. I just put my ears back and went for it. You know?
Still going. Fends one off on the right. On the left. Still going. And the crowd are just going wild. Tremendous try.
Ian Kirkpatrick from Poverty Bay.
It was just one of 50 tries Ian Kirkpatrick scored for the All Blacks, but Lancaster Park was his greatest. Even off the rugby field, our men were great movers. In 1949, they didn't build bodies as big, but they could certainly move their muscles.
The title of Mr. New Zealand was awarded to Eddie Horton for best all-round physical condition and posture. And his Whangarei teammate Keith Going, winner of 2 special awards, gave a demonstration of muscle control. Eddie Horton did something along the same lines with his shoulder blades.
However, the women's togs of the time left a little more to the imagination.
The highly qualified judges give their verdict, and the winner is decked out with a sash and declared Miss Aotearoa for 1949.
There were other women who put their beauty to dance. Rowena Jackson. She danced her way from Invercargill to Covent Garden. Principal dancer with the Royal Ballet from 1954 to 1959. She was our first international ballerina. She was renowned for her lyrical interpretation of the classics and also her technical skill. In 1959, she toured New Zealand with the Royal Ballet, along with fellow New Zealand dancer Alexander Grant and new husband and dance partner Philip Chatfield. The same year, she returned home to teach and to inspire another generation of would-be ballerinas. Back in the back blocks, Bill Hamilton was at work. Charles William Fielder Hamilton, out from the back blocks. From his workshop at Irishman Creek in the Mackenzie country, Bill Hamilton set out to go on water where no man had gone before.
Special centrifugal pump which feeds the jet.
The boat fulfilled its inventor's dream of a machine which could explore the shallow, fast-flowing rivers of the South Island. The Hamilton jet was his dream come true, and the whole world got the benefit.
And so there he goes against more currents than one, an outstanding industrialist and inventor, whose choice it is to live far from the cities, through the snowy winters and dry summers of the remote Mackenzie Plains.